Well, hello and thank you for joining me for another ITY video with top Australian and international executives. Today I have with me Shara Evans, Futurist and Chief Executive Officer at Market Clarity. Welcome to the program.
Hey Alex, great to be here.
Thank you very much. Now, before we get on to your closing day 2 keynote speech at CBIT Australia 2016, where we are today, I thought I'd ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be a futurist, and a bit about your company, Market Clarity.
Well, I've been in the technology game for pretty much all of my working life, and I started in the telecommunications industry, initially designing network protocols that make the networks work.
Yeah.
And along the way I got promoted into program management and sales and marketing, and my approach was always to help my carrier customers at the time develop a business case for new technologies. And I became known as someone who is very good at forecasting the next big thing. So, for example, in the early 90s, I was telling my carrier customers about data networks and how the internet would be huge. And this is back before we even had dial-up as a widespread service. There was no World Wide Web. And their primary revenue was all voice related. Yeah. And I was so radical that I even said, well, you mark my words, in the coming years you'll find that all of your voice goes over the data networks too. Yeah. And I predicted things like Skype types of services that would be free consumer applications.
Must have been freaking some of those people out at the time.
Oh, absolutely. Like I had a lot of, no. What about our leased line revenue? That's going to cannibalize. And I'm like, no, we're talking about brand new lines of revenue. And along the way, people started to call me a futurist. And back in '97, when deregulation happened here in the telco space, I formed my first company, which is called Telsight, and is still going. Yeah. And I had a whole bunch of my carrier customers say to me, you're wasting your time working for vendors. You really should have your own consulting firm and research firm, because the advice that you're giving us is actually better than the big consulting firms are telling us, and more accurate, and you're able to paint a business case for us. So that was my spur to enter the land of entrepreneurship. And back in 2002, UXC tapped me on the shoulders and they wanted to buy the company, and I stayed in the merged entity for another 3 years, and then formed this company, Market Clarity, back in 2006. Wow, it's already been 10
decade,
years.
Yeah, incredible.
And so I've been in the telecom space, and a couple of years ago I decided to really embrace the fact that I was a futurist and had a reputation for calling next big things, and I wanted to branch into a whole range of other technologies, things like robotics and 3D printing and artificial intelligence.
All the exciting stuff.
And augmented reality and virtual reality and holograms and drones and nanotech and all these really cool, amazing technologies that have with them opportunities and threats for many, many industries.
Sure. So, before we get onto your talk, one of your latest research areas is Future Tech 2026, which must be dovetailing quite beautifully with your keynote. So tell us a bit about that research and its ongoing nature.
Well, it's not actually a published report. It's a body of research that examines the very wide world of emerging technologies, and specifically how they're going to impact different vertical industries. So the finance industry would be one, healthcare industry, cybersecurity sort of runs with the thread all the way through. Yeah. And I take the materials and use them as the basis for keynote speeches like I'll be giving today at CBIT, as well as helping companies design programs that leverage these technologies so that they can make money, save money, or solve a problem in creative ways, or identify the technologies and social trends that are going to disrupt their business and maybe turn over their revenue apple cart.
Get ahead of that and disrupt themselves before somebody else does.
Because if you don't know what's coming over the horizon, you can't really plan for it. Yeah. So it's long-term strategic planning based on a lot of scientific evidence, and I spend a lot of time going into research labs and talking to scientists and startups and all kinds of companies about the things that they're working on, so that as I'm talking to my clients and in my keynote speeches, the materials that I draw upon are not just things that I've read about in a newspaper somewhere. I've actually gone into the labs and had really in-depth conversations with the people that are inventing this stuff.
Yeah, it's really authentic stuff, what you're doing. So, on that, now I'll have a video of your keynote as a separate video following this one in the article this all appears in. But what are the key themes that you'll be talking about today? And what do you hope the CeBIT delegates will learn from your session?
I think there's really two key themes. The first is, what is the state of security today? And sadly, we're in a state of ongoing war, and it's not going to get any better.
I mean, part of this is because in the original times, when computers were first sort of developed, it was a much safer world, but security wasn't built in as a foundational thing. It's all been bolted on way after the fact, and this is a cause of many of the problems that we have today.
Well, you're dead right, Alex. And here we are in 2016, where we see these massive hacks occurring pretty much every day.
Minecraft was hacked yesterday. Did you know?
Which one?
Minecraft, Microsoft's Minecraft, millions of email.
Okay.
It's just there's a new hack attack every day.
Yeah, well, I didn't hear about Minecraft, but here in Australia, Gumtree was hacked yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, right, it's like
just every single day I read about somebody else that's been hacked. And if you look at the global space, it's multiple hacks a day, and they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
And how many are never exposed that we don't even know about? It must be a lot. I mean, the mandatory disclosure laws are not in place everywhere.
There's some scary ones, and I'll be talking about a few of those today.
Sure.
But just going back to the biggest risk, here we are in 2016. We know that security is an issue, and we've got all these new technologies that are rolling out, and security is an afterthought. Like it's not even there. I read a report last year that HP put out where they were looking at smartwatches, and something like 70% of the OS upgrades were not even encrypted. And another half of the smartwatches that they looked at didn't even have PIN protection. It's crazy. Why would you be designing brand new technology
in 2016?
In 2016, and not even putting basic security protocols there.
I mean, they talk about the Internet of Things, and they talk about the Internet of hackable things.
Oh, there's even search engines that let you find what is an IoT device. And
Showdown, the Showdown search engine.
The one.
It looks up. You can look at cameras and all sorts of devices, and it's just incredible how many are still stuck on default passwords, and it's mind-numbing, really.
Or not even have passwords. And the worst part about it is a lot of these devices have such small code spaces that you can't go in and fix the code. It's just there. Like there's no source code that you can update.
That makes them obsolete. Basically, they need to be ripped and replaced with newer technologies that can be updated. And yet, some of these things are in crucial applications that it's expensive to change or too fiddly. But it needs to be done.
And how is a consumer supposed to know this stuff? Even the corporations, the people that are in the security departments don't know this kind of stuff. Last year I was doing a talk at a Queensland Police-sponsored CyberCrime forum, and we had a bit of a breakout group, and I was at a table with a whole bunch of security professionals from the corporate world and a few from policing world, and I said, well, how many of you actually have done penetration testing on wearable devices? And
let alone your entire organization.
And everybody's face just dropped. But people are wearing these into your office, and they're plugging them into computers that are connected to your network, or they're using Wi-Fi on your network. The thing that many people don't understand is that any vulnerability, any weak spot can be used by a hacker to get to something else and something else and something else.
And it's not that it can be used, the chances are it will be used.
Absolutely. And depending on the dollar value attached to it, or what may be behind that corporate firewall, that's how diligent they'll be.
Now, I don't want to take any thunder away from your keynote presentation, but is there anything else that you want to just focus on before we move on to biometrics?
I'd like to talk about data breaches for a second, because that is becoming more and more prevalent, and they're getting bigger and bigger.
Well, as a result of all these hacks.
Yes, exactly. And some of them are downright scary. There was one about a year ago in the U.S., the Office of Personnel Management. Now,
the federal government, which was all of the employees.
Yes.
Very high level. That's now in the hands of the Russians or the Chinese or God knows who.
Exactly.
Unbelievable.
So 21 million people were impacted. So this is...
That's almost the population of Australia.
Yeah. Well, this is the security company or agency that is meant to be screening people at very high-risk jobs. It got
security clearance levels and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
And some of this information, if it's out there, people can be blackmailed. I mean, it's unbelievable stuff.
They even got fingerprints. And so these are the people that are undercover agents. They're spies, right? If those fingerprints are gone, their identity is compromised, their lives are compromised. And for normal people, your social security number is gone. It's like the tax file ID here in Australia. Your name and date, place of birth, your family members, all of these amazingly penetrating questions. And we've seen this happen time and time again. The head of the agency was sacked as a result of this breach. And then here we are in Australia.
Should have been put in jail, quite frankly.
Well, here we are in Australia.
I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, the Parliament House was hacked by the Chinese, they were saying, or something. I mean, it's, I don't know the truth of that, but I mean, we've been hacked. Our government's been hacked too.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing that's really bothering me right now, Alex. We've seen all these breaches. We've seen that identity can be compromised for your entire life with these kinds of agencies, and we have the Australian Bureau of Statistics wanting to keep information about our identity along with our census answers.
Which was never meant to be the case.
No, it was meant to be private and anonymous, and I think they're setting up the biggest bloody honeypool of information, honeypot, of information that is just going to be very attractive to hackers.
Right for hackers, right?
Yes.
So, what about biometrics? How secure are they? And clearly that's one of the extra additional, I mean, no longer is it about second factor or two-factor authentication. Now we're talking about multiple factors of authentication, of which biometrics is just one.
That's right. So if you think about something like a fingerprint, once it's hacked, what are you going to do? Burn off your fingers and, not have fingerprint?
You have nanobots to give you new fingerprints.
Yeah, well, in the future,
in 10 years.
In the future, that's possible. But imagine that you were hacked and you can't ever use a fingerprint as a touch ID on any of your devices ever again for the rest of your life, just because there may be a security breach out there somewhere. And then you've got things like facial recognition, and there are false positives, and it's up in the order of about 20%, but the bigger that the database gets, the more likely it is that there'll be false positives. And what if that database is compromised and somebody swaps in my picture or your picture for a known criminal, and
you have a lot of trouble at the next checkpoint or the next time you leave the country, or
absolutely,
chucked in jail.
Trying to disprove that an authoritative database isn't the correct one can be really hard.
It's like that movie Enemy of the State. Suddenly you're the enemy, and all your credit cards, everything points to you being the bad guy, and you've been framed.
Yes, exactly, and it could happen. I mean, and what if they go through and put these lethal autonomous weapon systems into play, and a gun gets fired at you because you're a known terror suspect, but really you're not. You're just a journalist, and somebody's stuck in your picture there.
That's it. Yeah. Well, I mean, all of these things are the stuff of sci-fi dystopian nightmares. And yet we're rapidly approaching a lot of these scenarios becoming science fact, and we need to be working now to sort of make sure that all the safeguards are put in so that the scenario described does not happen.
So two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication is really key for doing this, and I think once we get these automated AI-driven systems in there, if they're drawing just on that database that can be compromised, we need to have some sort of check before a horrific action happens. But there's a new biometric technology that I've just learned about a couple of weeks ago, and it's still very experimental, but it's a brain print.
Right.
And the way that this works is that you've got a skull cap with EEGs put on, and instead of just measuring your brain waves, what they do is they show you a series of different images, and all of us have different reactions to different images. It triggers different parts of our brain, and that in effect gives us a unique brain print. The interesting thing about this kind of technology is that if that brain print database was compromised, you could redo it by looking at a different set of images, and that would give you some level of comfort that if that's hacked, you could redo it. Another really good thing about this is that somebody with very nefarious desires can't just cut off your finger and use it as a biometric access
point.
point.
To chop off your entire head.
Well, and even if they chop off your entire head, your brain print's not going to be working anymore.
It'll be
exactly.
Deactivated,
so this is the sort of technology that's still in the very early prototype stage, but at some stage we might have really tiny little devices that consumers use that measure a brain print or a past thought instead of a password, and give us some sort of real security that can be updated in case there's a compromise somewhere.
And of course, it makes me think of how voice passwords that certain devices use can be fooled by the fact that you've got a cold or you're drunk or something like that. And so it makes me think, could your brain pattern be changed by being under the influence of various substances, or by having a brain injury or something? So, I mean, with every advance, there's ways to defeat it or get around it or have it stymied, and this is why we need multiple factors of authentication. Yeah. Just like the bad guys use blended threats, we need blended ways of protecting.
Blended protection.
Yeah. Well, that's what the antivirus companies do. That's what we have to do for security. So you mentioned all of these cameras that are recording us in terms of, the just facial recognition. But I mean, cameras are recording our every move. What can we do to ensure our privacy there, while still looking for the terrorists?
Well, it's not just facial recognition, it's emotion detection too. So the cameras are getting more and more sophisticated where they don't even have to be looking at you head on. They're able to detect faces in a crowd from an angle.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, so they're pervasive. And then we have drones flying around with cameras, and
those autonomous weapon systems, at least in Afghanistan.
Yes, exactly. Gosh, it's reminding me of like Terminator or something. Yeah. There was something that I read about in a scientific paper just a few months ago, which is a metamaterial, which is basically material science, where they've discovered a way through a liquid metal alloy to be able to create what is being called an invisibility shield. And it works at different...
Like an invisibility cloak from Harry Potter,
Yeah, so right now it's limited to a number of radar frequencies, and it's still fairly big, but it wraps around things. It's still very, very early days, but the scientists who are working on this project have a vision that these materials will be able to be shrunk down smaller and smaller and smaller, and that eventually they'll also be able to block out visible light as well as infrared light. So you can imagine in the future you might have clothes that has this metamaterial built into it and effectively gives you an invisibility shield, or makeup, your woman's foundation might have little tiny invisibility specks, and the next thing you know, you're not being recorded by cameras. I think we're at least 10 years away from something like that.
And perhaps longer, but I mean, it's stuff that people are working on to make it a reality. So in the short term, what is the one emerging technology that people may not know about that can be a real game changer for enterprise?
I'd have to pick augmented reality. And for those who are listening that don't know what augmented reality is, what I'm talking about is a contextual overlay on the things that you see. So if you can imagine that you're wearing smart glasses that have cameras and communication systems, and you're a maintenance worker, let's say, and you're looking at this row of pipes, you would have to be communicating with someone in the back office to find out. Or looking at
books or on your iPad.
Something to figure out which pipe is which.
And to not cut the wrong cable, for example.
Yeah, not cut the wrong wire, not touch something that may be too hot or too cold. With augmented reality, what you would be able to see is superimposed on that. So your line of vision would be out here, you're wearing the glasses, but you'd be able to see a pop-up that tells you which the right pipe is, and what the pressure is inside that pipe, and which way do you turn the knob, to bring the pressure up or down.
I mean, it's information overlaid on reality.
Exactly, or in
directions when you're going down the street.
Yes.
I mean, watching the HoloLens video from Microsoft gives a great example of that. But sorry, please keep going.
Yeah. So again, in an industrial setting, imagine that you've got it switched into infrared view, and that way you can tell how hot or cold something is, so that you don't accidentally reach out and touch something. And you've got cameras on there, so you can have an expert back in the home office guide you on doing something in the field with your hands free. I think that this can be a game changer for a lot of industries.
Clearly, it's going to be so big that it's going to make reality seem bland in comparison. You're going to want to have this on all the time, or almost all the time, so that things that there's all this information that you could be seeing that you wouldn't be able to see without the glasses. I mean, the original sci-fi version of this was being able to, when I look at a picture of or meet you in person, up pops your name, your date of birth, the number of kids you have, you know, there's some bit of history about you, and suddenly, you know, when I'm meeting you, it's like, hi Shara, how's it going? How are the kids? How's this? How's that? You know, and that's the classic one that people have dreamt about for the last 20 or 30 years. But of course, augmented reality makes it possible. This, of course, is different to virtual reality, isn't it?
Oh, it's totally different. Virtual reality is basically you're chopping out reality and you're in a digital world. And you know, if I'm walking around with these big chunky glasses on and there's a table there, unless it's sensitive enough to show me grids of where there are objects, or I have someone like you saying, Shara, stop, I could trip over a table and, you know, I've got no idea what's happening around me.
Virtual reality blocks the world and gives you a new reality, but augmented reality could do virtual reality effectively by, well, I mean, you probably want to have glasses that do block things off, but it can just change. I think to me, augmented reality is more exciting than virtual reality.
It's a continuum, you know, so you go from having a digital overlay on top of the real world to completely including the real world. And where it's going to go in the future, Alex, is in smart contacts. And these smart contacts...
Sony just had a patent on that, I think it was, and Google was doing it too.
Yeah, Google does, and you know, there will be others that follow along. And they'll combine biotech with ICT so that they'll be able to do things like self-adjust your vision depending on where you're looking, or they'll be able to detect, you know, your glucose and sugar levels, or be able to detect precancerous situations. You know, so people will have not only this amazing additional information that can help them figure out, oh, who's that person? You know I met him or her 5 years ago, and they sort of look like so-and-so, but what's the context? And they'll be able to draw on social media profiles and your own address book and calendar and all sorts of things.
It's really a blending of human and machine.
Yes.
We start becoming cyber people, you know, and we're not going to want to take the glasses off because they will be our digital memories that will do a lot of the mundane work of remembering things for us.
Well, it's going to get crazier than that. Yeah. In the mid-2030s, Ray Kurzweil is predicting that we'll actually have little tiny nanobots attached to our neocortex that will communicate directly with the global brain, which will be the next generation.
Yeah, cybernetics, neuromorphic technology, here we come. And just for those who are watching that haven't come to CeBIT yet, I noticed earlier walking up to the media area that there is a Oculus Rift on one of the stands that people are lined up to try out. So if you haven't tried virtual reality with an Oculus or a HTC Vive, it's definitely worth doing. So Shara, what stands out to you in the Australian market in regards to the use of business technology?
Look, Australians love playing around with technology, that's for sure. But one of the things that I find a bit worrying is that so many companies are focused just on the next 12 months, on the bottom line, that they're not taking this leap into things that are over the horizon. And frankly, it's moving so fast. You know, we're on an exponential up curve that if you don't look over the horizon, you might find that your business is steamrolled by something because it doesn't have an ROI in 12 months. Maybe the ROI is in 24 months. And your competitors that are, you know, a bit more forward thinking might have made that investment and they're going to leapfrog over you, or they may be competitors from completely outside your field that just, you know, ride over the top on what you're doing. And it's just so important to have that kind of vision. And what I'd encourage companies to do is just do an imagination session with your executives. Imagine what the world might be like in 5 years. You know, what have you heard, you know, in the business press or in the technology press or even in science fiction? What do you think might be real in the 5 years? And then backtrack it to what does that mean for your business? And I think you'll come out with some really extraordinary insights.
So that's obviously the advice you'd give to business owners to help them prepare for the future. Is there any other exercises they can do to brainstorm that beyond engaging your services at Market Clarity?
Well, you know, engaging with different people who specialize in over-the-horizon thinking is one way to really broaden your portfolio. But I also encourage companies to look at what I call creative collaboration. So instead of thinking, what can I do just inside my own house? Oh, that's too expensive or too risky. Think about who else there might be in the ecosystem that you could partner with to start experimenting with things. So for example, if you're a large corporation, could you partner with startups that are specialists in particular technologies? Are there research labs that are working on things like robotics or artificial intelligence or augmented reality or some other technologies that might apply to your business? So instead of trying to take it all on yourself and gain, all of that expertise in-house, why not partner with others who could be part of a larger ecosystem and start with smaller projects, prototype it, think like a startup instead of like a big company, and try a bunch of things, and also understand that just because something doesn't work out, it's not a failure. You might have 20 little projects, and one of them is going to be the next $100 million line of business.
And the others have given you plenty of learnings that you will apply to your next set of 20 ideas.
That's right, and you want to keep going, A failure is not a failure, you learn from it.
Absolutely. Now, as we get to the end of the interview, the last couple of questions, regular viewers would know this is one of my signature questions, which I borrowed from Ashton Kutcher, which is, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received to help you get where you are today?
Go for it. If you can imagine yourself doing something, then try it. Another great piece of advice that I've had from my business mentors over the years is volunteer your time to different industry organizations or different nonprofit organizations, gain different skill sets, mix in with different people, and really cross-pollinate the ideas and experiences that you have, because that makes you much more valuable in the long run, and it's a lot more fun.
Sure. So, do you have any final messages for ITY viewers and readers and for your current and future customers?
Well, first of all, we need to stop having security as an afterthought, privacy as an afterthought, and ethics being completely missing in action. Because frankly, if we continue down this path, we're going to have a future that we don't want to live in.
It'll be that dystopian future that we
this is the time that we can really grab it and change what our future is going to look like, and especially those of us in the tech space, we know what has to be done. Now let's just go out there and do it.
Shara, it's been fascinating to talk to you. I look forward to watching your keynote this afternoon, and I wish you the best of luck for the future, and I hope we can talk again.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.